From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Deep Dive. So today we're going to take a closer look at some pretty interesting stuff that's been going on lately. A lot involving Elon Musk, a lot involving former President Trump, and we've got social media posts, news articles, all sorts of stuff. And you might be thinking, what do these things even have to do with each other?
Yeah.
That's what we're here to find out.
Right.
Right. So we're going to try to peel back the layers a little bit, see if there's a bigger story here, and more importantly, what it means for all of you listening.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes things that seem totally unrelated on the surface can actually end up being connected in ways we never would have expected. And when we're talking about people like Musk and Trump, who both have, a lot of influence, I think making those connections can be really insightful.
Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the things that really grabbed my attention was this thing about Musk calling for the impeachment of a federal judge who had blocked Trump's attempt to use the Alien Enemies Act for deportations. What's the story there?
Well, to understand why that's such a big deal, we need to go back in time a little bit. So the Alien Enemies Act is actually part of a set of laws that are called the Alien and Sedition Acts. And these were passed way back in 1798. And they were super controversial even then.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they basically allow the president to deport or even imprison non-citizens who are considered dangerous, and a lot of times without any real evidence.
So basically just a way to silence critics and get rid of people that they didn't like, huh?
That's one way to put it. And the thing is, these acts have been criticized for, forever.
Right.
Because they violate these basic ideas we have about free speech and the right to a fair trial.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine being kicked out of the country, or worse, thrown in jail just because somebody in power thinks you're a threat.
Yeah. That's a little scary.
Yeah, it's a pretty scary thought.
So this makes Musk calling for impeachment even more, kind of alarming.
Exactly. Especially when you think about the fact that using this law today would be a total legal nightmare. I mean, it goes against everything we believe in as a society.
Totally.
And you see a lot of people online are really aware of just how dangerous this type of rhetoric can actually be.
It's also interesting, I think, to point out that Musk doesn't actually have the power to impeach anyone.
Right.
He doesn't have any elected office or anything.
Exactly. So it makes you think, why even say it?
Yeah.
And some people online are saying that maybe Musk and Trump aren't really misunderstanding how the government works, but instead are intentionally poking the bear.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're trying to push the boundaries and see how far they can go to kind of mess with the system.
That's interesting. It makes you wonder, what is the end goal here,
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of Musk and pushing boundaries, there's been a lot of talk about his businesses lately. We've got stories about the Cybertruck reportedly having huge design flaws.
Right.
UK users are ditching Starlink because of his political views. And another SpaceX rocket just blew up on launch.
Yeah. It seems like his companies are hitting some roadblocks for sure.
It does, yeah.
And then there's the whole thing about all the government contracts he relies on.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Some estimates say his companies could get something like $11.8 billion in government contracts over the next few years.
Wow.
It's a huge amount of taxpayer money.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
People are, calling it corporate welfare.
Right. I mean, he's all about being, this self-made entrepreneur.
Right.
But then he doesn't mind taking government handouts either, apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that really kind of ties into this whole bigger discussion about what the government's role should even be in helping businesses. I mean, some people think it's totally necessary for innovation and economic growth.
Right.
But then others say it creates an unfair advantage.
Right. It stifles competition.
Yeah.
For sure.
I saw a commenter who had a pretty interesting take on all this.
Oh, yeah.
They were saying that Tesla's value is basically what's keeping all of Musk's other businesses afloat. So if Tesla were to tank, his whole empire could come crashing down.
That's a scary thought for him. And it's important to remember that even the most successful businesses, they can be really vulnerable.
For sure. Yeah.
Things happen.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about DOGE, this organization Musk is heading. They claim to have saved taxpayers a whopping $115 billion.
Yeah.
But a recent fact check actually found that the real savings are more like $26.05 billion.
Hmm.
Still a lot of money, but that's quite a difference.
I bet it is a big difference. And it's a little weird that there's such a discrepancy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like at first, DOGE was very open about how they did things. They even provided a bunch of details so people could double-check their work. But lately, they've gotten much more secretive. It makes it way harder to actually see what they're doing.
So what DOGE calls savings is actually coming at a pretty big cost to some people.
Right. A lot of folks online are saying these cuts the DOGE is making are actually hurting really important services like education,
Oh, wow.
healthcare,
Yeah.
social safety nets,
Yeah.
like programs that millions of people rely on.
So it's not just about saving money.
Right.
It's about how that money is being saved and
Right.
who it affects.
Exactly. And that raises some serious ethical questions.
Yeah.
Like, is it okay to achieve savings if you have to cut programs that are literally helping the most vulnerable people in our society?
Yeah.
And what about the long-term consequences of these cuts? I mean, nobody's really talking about that.
It's complicated. And it gets even more complicated when you consider what happened with Musk's staff and the U.S. Institute of Peace.
Oh, right, right.
So they showed up with FBI agents and everything, but they were turned away because the Institute is an independent entity.
Right.
And then shortly after that, the government had to ask Musk and DOGE for an extension to hand over some internal documents because of a Freedom of Information Act request.
Interesting.
So, I mean, I don't know, these events seem kind of troubling.
Yeah, they kind of paint a picture of, like, maybe a power struggle is going on.
Yeah.
Like, maybe Musk and DOGE are trying to avoid being transparent and having people look over their shoulder.
And then there's this post that Musk made where he compared public sector employees to, get this, the people who carried out atrocities under regimes like Stalin, Mao, and Hitler.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I saw that.
It's pretty dark.
That kind of talk is, like, really dangerous, you know?
Yeah.
It's demonizing the people who are working really hard to keep our society functioning.
Yeah.
And it's especially disturbing because we're seeing a rise in threats against federal employees.
It feels like there's a growing distrust of the very institutions that are meant to be there for us.
Right.
And it's not just coming from individuals. It seems like it's coming from inside the government, too.
Yeah. And that leads us to the pushback that we've been seeing from the judicial system, particularly, again, some of the stuff the Trump administration has been trying to do.
Okay, so let's talk about that. A federal judge in Maryland made some pretty big moves.
Yeah, this judge issued a huge restraining order that blocked the Trump administration from putting any more reductions in force into action.
Reductions in force? What does that even mean?
It basically means mass layoffs across all government agencies.
Wow. Okay, so this judge is stepping in to stop those mass layoffs. What was the reason for that?
Well, the order specifically mentioned a directive to fire like half of all the people working at the education department.
Wow.
Yeah, and it says that agencies have to rehire any probationary employees that were let go recently. Plus, the order covers 18 different agencies. So this is a big deal.
So it seems like this judge is trying to protect those public servants from what they see as maybe illegal or at least questionable actions by the Trump administration. What are the implications here?
Well, this is a pretty big legal challenge to the administration's power to just go and shrink the government workforce like that.
Yeah.
It raises some serious questions about who really has the power here, the president or the courts.
And this isn't the only time someone's pushed back against what the Trump administration is doing. There was also that thing where the top lawyer at the IRS was replaced in the middle of them trying to get access to taxpayer data for, I guess, immigration enforcement.
Yeah, that's a really worrying situation because it involves the privacy of every taxpayer and whether the IRS is even being honest anymore. That position, chief counsel, is a super important role at the IRS because they have to make sure everything the agency does is legal.
So what exactly was the administration trying to do with that taxpayer data? And why was the IRS pushing back so hard?
Well, there were a few requests they made to the IRS, including one that would have given, you guessed it, Elon Musk's staff access to that data.
Wait, hold on. Why in the world would Musk's staff need access to taxpayer information?
That's a great question. And it raises some red flags about whether they'd be misusing that sensitive information. Because you can't just look at taxpayer data for reasons that have nothing to do with taxes. It's actually against the law.
So they were trying to use this information for something completely unrelated to taxes.
It sounds like maybe they were trying to use it for immigration enforcement, which is a huge overreach.
So basically they were trying to go around the law.
Pretty much. There's a law called Section 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code, And it's very clear about when you can and can't share that information. If you do it without permission, it's a felony, and you can face fines, prison time, or even lose your job if you're a government official.
So was the IRS basically trying to protect people's privacy?
Exactly. They have a duty to make sure taxpayer information isn't used for unauthorized purposes, especially when it could have legal and ethical consequences. We're talking about fundamental rights here, like privacy and the rule of law.
You know, it's amazing to me how all of these things that seem totally separate, Musk's statements, his businesses, the whole DOGE thing, and now this pushback from the courts, they're all kind of connected in a way.
You're right. There's this common thread running through it all, like a power struggle, a disregard for how things are supposed to work, and a lack of transparency. It really makes you wonder what the consequences of all this are going to be.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, and that's exactly what we're going to do after a quick break. When we come back, we'll explore what all of this means for you and the potential fallout from these actions. Stick with us.
It's a lot to process for sure. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that these events, even though they seem like separate things, are all part of a bigger pattern that's emerging. We're seeing how power is shifting and how the lines between different parts of society are getting blurry.
Yeah, it's like the old rules don't apply anymore, you know?
Right.
And that can be kind of scary when you think about what might happen because of it.
Absolutely. When you have powerful people like Musk and Trump doing things outside the normal ways we hold people accountable, it affects everyone.
So what does that mean for us, the everyday folks? Like, why should we even care about this stuff?
Well, one thing is it directly affects the things we depend on, like schools and hospitals. When DOGE cuts funding to those essential programs, real people are the ones who suffer. It could be your kid's school that loses money, or your grandma who has her healthcare benefits cut back.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And it's not even just about essential services, is it?
No, it's also about whether we can even trust the institutions that are supposed to be there for us.
Right.
I mean, when you see someone like Musk openly attacking a federal judge, or the Trump administration trying to sneak around the law to get taxpayer data, it makes you wonder if you can trust the systems that are designed to protect us.
It does feel like we're living in a time where facts are up for debate all the time, and the people in charge aren't really held responsible for what they do.
You're not wrong. And that's exactly why it's more crucial now than ever to stay informed, be able to think critically, and hold those in power accountable for their actions.
But how do we even do that? It can feel so overwhelming. Like, what can one person even do to make a difference?
You'd be surprised how much power we actually have as individuals. The first step is to stay informed, like you're doing right now by listening to this. Pay attention to what's happening in your community, nationally, even globally.
So knowledge is power.
Totally. But it's not enough just to know stuff. We got to actually do something with that knowledge. We can support organizations that we believe in, vote in every election, contact our representatives, and speak up when something's not right.
Don't be afraid to make some noise.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of talking about this stuff with other people. Talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors about these issues. Share what you learn and encourage them to learn too.
Start a chain reaction, kind of.
I love that. Because at the end of the day, change happens when people come together and say, enough is enough, we deserve better.
You know, thinking about that Maryland judge who stopped those mass layoffs, it gives me a little bit of hope. It shows that there are people in positions of power who are willing to stand up for what's right, even when it means going against the people at the top.
That's a really good point. It shows why it's so important to have an independent judicial system. When the courts can push back against the president, it helps make sure the rule of law is actually being followed.
So we got to protect those systems that are there to keep things in check.
Absolutely, because when those systems get weakened, that's when you start to see more abuse and corruption.
Okay, so we talked about how important it is to stay informed, get involved, and protect the institutions that protect our democracy. What else can we do to navigate this crazy world that seems to be changing so fast?
I think it's super important to develop those critical thinking skills. We're constantly bombarded with information from everywhere, and it's hard to tell what's real and what's not, or what the motives are behind certain actions.
So how do we get better at critical thinking?
One easy trick is to ask questions. Don't just accept whatever you hear or read as fact. Dig a little deeper, look at it from different angles, and see if there's real evidence to back up what's being said.
So don't believe everything you see on the internet.
Especially on the internet. Another good thing to do is to be aware of your own biases. Everyone has biases, and we need to know how they might be affecting how we understand things.
So being self-aware is key.
For sure. And one last thing. Remember that it's okay to disagree with other people. It's actually a good thing. Having healthy debates is a vital part of a functioning democracy. But let's try to do it respectfully and with a willingness to listen to what others have to say.
Even if we don't agree with them.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and we need to find ways to work through our differences and find solutions that work for everyone.
Man, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From Musk's wild statements to the possibility of them misusing taxpayer data, from the impacts of DOGE's cuts to why it's so crucial to have an independent judiciary, it's clear that there's a lot at stake right now.
You're absolutely right. But I also want to stress that we're not helpless. We have the ability to create the future we want.
It all comes down to making smart choices, having productive conversations, and holding those in power accountable.
Exactly. And remember, the future isn't set in stone. It's something we build together through what we do and the choices we make.
So choose wisely, right.
Couldn't agree more.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
But before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought. It really makes you think, where do we go from here? What's next?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I wish I had a crystal ball.
Me too. But even without one, I think there are a few important things we need to keep in mind as we move forward.
Okay, like what?
Well, first of all, we got to remember that these problems aren't just going to disappear overnight. These forces we're talking about, the technology, the gap between the rich and poor, how divided everyone is politically, these are huge problems that are really deeply rooted.
So it sounds like we're in for a bit of a rough ride.
Yeah, there are going to be more challenges along the way. But it's not all bad. The fact that we're having these discussions, that people are paying attention and they're worried, that's a good thing.
It means we're not just sitting back and letting things happen.
Exactly. And that's where our power is, in knowing what's going on, in being willing to challenge the way things are, and in working together to create a better future.
So what can we do as individuals to actually make a difference? I mean, we've talked about staying informed, getting involved, thinking critically, and protecting our institutions, but is there anything else?
You know, I think one of the most powerful things we can do is try to be more empathetic. It's easy to get caught up in our own little worlds and forget that there are other people out there who have different experiences, different struggles, and different opinions.
So, like, put ourselves in their shoes.
Exactly. Try to understand where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with them. Just listen with an open mind and be willing to learn.
I mean, that's easier said than done, especially these days when it seems like everyone's fighting all the time.
I know, it's not easy. But it's so important. When we can connect with each other as human beings, even if we have different opinions, it creates a space for real conversation, understanding, and finding things we agree on.
And that's how real change happens, right? Not from the top down, but from the ground up.
Absolutely. When people come together, share their stories, and work toward shared goals, that's when we start to see real progress.
So what's the big takeaway here? What do we want our listeners to remember?
The future isn't something that's already decided. We create it through the choices we make, both as individuals and as a society. We have the power to build a world where everyone can thrive. But it takes effort. We need to be engaged, informed, and most importantly, compassionate.
We need to think critically, challenge the way things are, and build bridges instead of walls.
Beautifully said.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope it's been insightful, made you think, and maybe even left you feeling a little more empowered.
And remember, this is just the start of the conversation. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep making your voice heard.
Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.